One popular resource many pre-med students tap into when preparing for the MCAT is a question of the day service. Well, essentially every day they send you a random question for each of the basic test sections. Well, these questions are based on real exams and are supposed to present you with realistic practice for the MCAT. The thing is, these question of the day resources have received criticism in the past. So we sought the advice of Clara Gillan, an experienced MCAT tutor who scored 526 on her own exam, so she knows what she's talking about. And today, she's going to give us a skinny on just how useful question of the day resources really are. Clara, let's start off with the obvious question for those who are embarking upon their MCAT prep. What are these question of the day resources and how do they work?
That is a great question. So you're going to see these everywhere. So I can tell you, I don't know, how many people watching this have already started like prepping in earnest versus they're, pretty early on in their prep. But even if you're pretty early on, you've probably seen question of the day from like a million different companies. And basically the premise is that you get a question to your email, or sometimes it's like in the form of an app, and you get like an app notification for like an MCAT practice question every single day. And that's the goal, and that's the idea. It's usually, one like sort of standalone or like freestanding question, not associated with like an MCAT passage.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, what do you like about the question of the day practice for students you've tutored in the past? And are these resources in fact beneficial?
Yeah, so it depends on how they're done. So I will say, full disclosure, I have, written questions of the day. My cat is here. I've written questions the day before. I've, really, in some ways, really promoted them to students. So they can be good. A few good things about them. So one is that if you're early on in your prep, maybe you haven't even started studying in earnest, and so you're not ready to do passages. Right. So you're just not there yet, even though that's something you should do pretty early on. Questions of the day can be great because it's like, okay, I'm a sophomore in college and I just want to see like one tiny little bit of the MCAT every single day.
Yeah.
So that can be cool. And similarly, if you're maybe in like a really busy period of your life, you're going to be prepping for the MCAT in like 8 months, but you just do not have time to start it yet. You can still sort of remind yourself in this nice daily rhythm, like, oh, here's the MCAT. Maybe I'll learn a little fact that could be helpful.
Okay, like a little drip feed of
100%.
Questions. Yeah, that's great.
Exactly.
Right. Well, so on the flip side of that question, what don't you like about MCAT question of the day resources, and what should students take into account when signing up for them?
Yeah. So this is a tricky thing because it really does depend on which company is providing them and that sort of thing. I would say that first of all, an MCAT like discrete. So discrete means like a question that doesn't go with the passage. Those are the minority of questions on the actual MCAT. So in the science sections, most questions are passage based. Very few questions are actually standalone or discrete.
Right.
And question of the day resources are typically a discrete question.
Right.
And so it can give people the wrong idea.
Yeah.
I think sometimes where they're like, oh, I've been doing a question every day for the last like 2 weeks, gotten almost all of them right, I'm doing great. But they don't replicate that kind of passage reasoning and analysis that you actually need. So that's the biggest thing I would say. And then also, a lot of times they're not the best questions. They're often free resources, which is cool. I love accessibility to MCAT content and all of that, but it's just they're not always like, the top tier questions that you could possibly encounter. So I would make sure you ask around. Right. See if you have any friends who have used them before, who have maybe taken the MCAT, be like, how helpful was this actually? And get some unbiased opinions.
Yeah. Yeah. And before we actually move on to the next question, I do want to add that for those of our viewers right now who like these question of the day resources, a helpful way they can combat the sort of linear nature of these questions is to actually create flashcards in Brainscape for each question, and especially those that you get wrong, so that you can drill yourself on that content and that you'll never forget it again. Just be aware of that problem is that the nature of these question of the day resources is that you don't ever see that question again. So if you get it wrong, you might forget that eventually, and that's the linear nature that we try to combat with Brainscape. Okay, so moving on. Yeah. So do you think that students could be spending their time more profitably doing something other than these questions of the day?
Yeah. So I first of all, I mean, I love your flashcard idea. That's absolutely true. I mean, there's nothing wrong with doing discrete questions for MCAT practice as long as you don't just treat them as like a one and done kind of thing. So yeah. But there are more productive things you could typically be doing.
Yeah.
So especially if you're, a little bit later in your prep, you don't want to do too much discrete practice instead of passages.
Yeah.
Because it's really easy to say, oh, I'm doing something productive. I'm still studying for the MCAT. Like I'm doing a question, and then use that as like a mental excuse to avoid doing the really hard and like emotionally taxing, but really productive work of passages.
Okay. All right. So let's say that a student has decided to register for an MCAT question of the day service. First of all, is there a particular brand or company that you think offers a decent product that you'd be willing to recommend?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I would say, I'm not affiliated with any of these companies, but one good one that actually, one company actually has like a passage of the day kind of service, and that's Jack Weston. So I'm not associated with Jack Weston, although I do, have met him and he's great. But he does like a passage of the day kind of thing, and I know a lot of students use that because that's just so cool.
That's great.
Right? It's like a whole passage.
Yeah.
So it totally gets around the thing that I was complaining about earlier with regard to questions of the day only being discrete and not being all that representative of the MCAT.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's a good one. Other than that, really any service that you sign up for can be okay if you treat the review of the questions really properly. So your flashcard point, that was a great one. And then another thing you can really do is like, okay, make sure you don't just answer the question in like 10 seconds. And you're like, oh, I got it right. Like good. And then move on. Instead you want to think about, okay, why did they put those wrong answers in? Like, how did I know those wrong answers were wrong? Like in addition to, how did I know the right answer was right? And then you can almost learn, more than your fair share. You can almost like cheat the system and get the absolute maximum amount out of each question.
Right. So that's for the nerds of you out there, called metacognition, thinking about your thinking. If you question your reasoning and your thinking, you are going to learn, you're going to remember that information so much better than if you just one and done, move on, got it right, got it wrong, oh well.
It's on the MCAT, actually. Metacognition.
But really?
It is.
I should take the MCAT, I can't. Okay, so what's the best way students should approach these questions of the day in order to get the most out of it? I think actually we've really just covered that in, making sure you understand why you got it right, why you got it wrong, perhaps making flashcards. Anything else you can think of?
Yeah, so those are definitely the big things. So exactly, like sort of really analyzing the question, the right answer and the wrong answers is huge. Potentially, if you can, even like saving it, like a flashcard format is great. Or any other way, you can think of to actually save this question in a way that isn't like super disorganized and hard to come back to later.
Yeah.
So that's all really good. Ask questions is the last one. So one way that you can actually let's say you sign up for a flash or question of the day service and you don't know if it's that good. You can often contact the people who write the questions. Oh yeah, and some companies are a lot better at reaching it back out than others. But like, let's say you find a question confusing, or you think they could have written it better, or you have a follow-up question. Just try it out. Ask someone about it, and maybe they'll get back to you with like some really great information. Maybe they'll, maybe they won't, and that can be, a way that you can use, to evaluate sort of that company.
Yeah.
And then, also talk to your friends about it. Talk to anyone with MCAT expertise, and make it a social fun thing.
It is fun. All right. So finally, what other tidbit of advice do you have for students who want to practice their knowledge and skills ahead of their MCAT?
Yeah. So flashcards are great. I think I would say I have two tidbits. So one is sort of the content. Like I talk a lot about how content isn't everything. Like strategy, analysis, like reasoning. Those are really key. But if you're early on, if you maybe haven't even started prepping yet, but you really want to like maximize your chances of doing well, something like flashcards, or something like if you can find short videos or something like that, just review the stuff. Like you've probably seen a lot of it in your college classes, so it might be a good refresher. You might have forgotten it all.
Yeah.
So that's the one good thing. And the other big thing is to review the AAMC's like publicly available resources, because they have a ton Yeah, they have so much stuff and no one ever really looks at it. It's a bummer because it's so good. Like the AAMC, just Google AAMC, what's on the MCAT, and you'll find some really great stuff.
I mean, these are the people who write the MCAT, right? You
Yes.
should be going to them for the best information and for their practice tests to get the best
Absolutely.
idea of what to expect. Yeah. Well, Clara, thank you so much. This has been great, and even more great value for our MCAT aspiring doctors out there. So yeah, thanks for chatting to me today.
Thank you.
Well, there you have some really great advice about those MCAT question of the day resources from all around MCAT super nerd, Clara Gillan. She's also the director of product at Med School Coach, which is a tutoring and consulting service for students who are embarking upon their education for a career in medicine. So if that sounds like you, and I think it is because you're watching this video, I encourage you to check them out. If you are preparing to take on the MCAT, make sure you get Brainscape certified MCAT flashcards in your corner. We have distilled down and organized the science content you need to know into an awesome collection of smart flashcards, which are proven to help you learn and remember content twice as fast as traditional study methods. Armed with these, you'll keep up that healthy cadence of daily review that is so essential for landing high scores on the MCAT. And for even more guidance, check out the other videos we have on Brainscape's medical channel, including more interviews like this one. And go to our MCAT Academy for free study guides on everything you need to know to prepare for and ace the MCAT. These tools, together with your ambition and hard work, is everything you need to rise to your challenge.